Hello and welcome, Inspired Podcast community. This is your new episode. My name is Caroline, and my today's guest is Brownell. And I'm so happy that you are here. Hello, and how are you doing today?
I am doing great and welcome. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you for saying yes to our podcast interview. And of course, I would like to introduce you to the audience. So, you are an author, inventor, songwriter, and explorer of metaphysical mysteries. In addition to being the host and executive producer of the Life is a Trip Reincarnation Stories podcast and the author of The End and the New We Meet Again trilogy, you are the author of over a dozen books and screenplays ranging from nonfiction, 5 Reasons Why Bad Things Happen, to fiction, including the duet stories novel series, children's books, and more. Your stories can be summarized as follows: lose yourself in the fiction, find yourself in the truth. Welcome to the Inspired Podcast, Brownell.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to meet you and it's a joy to be here.
Thank you. Likewise. And my first question is, your work spans across various genres, from fiction and nonfiction to children's books and screenplays. How do you approach the creative process differently for each type of writing? And how do these different formats influence each other in your work?
That's a fabulous question and I love it. I'll kind of address the approach with writing a novel versus a screenplay, because when I write a screenplay, I usually write the novel too, and vice versa. And so it helps a lot to start with the screenplay, because then you get a structure down, and then you get into the novel and you've got a structure, but then you really have to get deep into the characters and the motivations and the side characters and all those things. And then you can go back to the screenplay and make those characters richer. So I find that really, really helpful. As far as the overarching kind of question, as far as all the different kinds of genres I write, like some people say, how can you write kind of a sexy novel and a children's book? If you read my books, you'll see there's kind of a thread through them all. Like, you'll get that they're all me, even if I cross nonfiction to children's to whatever. And as you said, the lose yourself in the fiction, find yourself in the truth is a big message. And I always kind of get to a theme of the why, like there's a why things happen. And so the characters are usually looking for their why. They're trying to figure out what's their purpose, what's their motivation, what's in their way. So it really kind of helps. There's always kind of a metaphysical vibe, whether it's a children's book or a nonfiction book. I even have a book that I co-wrote with other people that's called 50 Shades Deeper, and it looks at the 50 Shades books, but it always goes deeper into the messages of kind of the why. So I think that's the easiest way to answer that. Did I answer your question?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. I understood more and more how it is related, the screenplay and the novel. And it makes so sense when you say you start with the screenplay in order to have the structure done. And then you go deeper into the characters and the story and fill it, so to say. I love it. Thank you so much. I
Thank
am
you.
also totally into writing. I love it. I feel it's like a start for me after 40 years of suppressing my dream, so I can learn so much from you. Thank you so much. And I have the next question for you.
Can I
Of course.
interrupt you real quick and ask you a question about that? Because I want to address your dream. Is if you ever have any story that has kind of a metaphysical message, maybe reincarnation, past lives, the other side, any of those kind of mysteries, please write it and submit it to our podcast so we can get your story out to the world. So just want to encourage your writing, because all writers should be encouraged. And if you have a story like that, that's what we're here for. So sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to make sure that you got that kind of boost, if you will.
It sounds fantastic, because I never thought of the metaphysical side of, I can understand nonfiction books like talking about business or psychology or scientific writing, for example, or in a newspaper. And then comes the fiction side, and you talk about this as well. So I published 2 books already, but it's years ago, like 15 years ago, and the other one was last year. But it feels like the beginning for me, and I will think about it. Thank you so much. And please also, dear listeners, the metaphysical side, or in general, if there's a story inside you, it has to be externalized, let's say, or put onto paper, right?
Exactly, exactly. I want to encourage writers, because that's kind of our whole purpose on my podcast, is to celebrate writers and get a voice out to the world and share these stories with the world. So, just wanted to encourage you. So sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to make sure you knew we're encouraging you.
Thank you so much. Yes, it helps. It helps, definitely. And I have a next question for you. The theme, lose yourself in the fiction, find yourself in the truth, is central to your storytelling. Can you share how this concept has evolved throughout your writing career and how it connects to your exploration of metaphysical mysteries?
Absolutely. I kind of, if you look at, you'd separate, like, lose yourself in the fiction, because fiction, you can kind of immerse yourself in a story, right? And you suspend your disbelief. You just enjoy, like, you don't have to believe in time travel to enjoy Back to the Future. You know what I mean? And so it allows you to kind of look into worlds that you wouldn't have looked into before or wouldn't have considered before. And so, and as I mentioned on our podcast and my writing, fiction often has more truth in it than nonfiction, and so it really, when you start looking at that, it can open more minds. It can get people to look at things that they wouldn't have considered. So our podcast, for example, is, the stories are fictional or factual, or anywhere in between. And sometimes, even when you're thinking you're writing a factual story, like about your life, allow yourself the freedom to go into things that you wouldn't consider, because sometimes you'll find deeper truths there than if you're just trying to, like, well, did that really happen? Am I saying it right? Just, like, let that go and just write.
Oh, yes. Wow, this is a great message. So it doesn't matter so much when we are in the conscious mind and we overthink too much. I think the message is here: just start and bring your story out, and then go from there and look what it looks like, for example.
Exactly. And let it fly. I mean, there's a story I think you might ask me about that I wrote called The End, that you mentioned. And that story was so powerful in that when I started writing it, I didn't know what I was going to write. And then all of a sudden, as I'm writing it, I realized it's true. Like, what I'm writing is really happening. I thought I was writing it as fiction. And then all of a sudden, this was real. And just for the listeners to know, and for you to know, what I did with that story is I wrote it from what I call the upstairs. So if you think that there are any powers or guides or angels or whatever you want to use as a term, in the upstairs, it's from their point of view, how they look at us. And so it feels really whimsical and crazy to think that I'm writing this story, and then all of a sudden I'm realizing, no, they are real. They're telling me about themselves. So you never know what comes out when you just kind of let that barrier of that restriction go and just write. And then all of a sudden now they're, like, talking to me and everything else. So you might think I'm crazy, but
Wow, no, I don't. It's like you are guided to write or tell your story to the world, and and everyone can witness this as well when we allow you. You mentioned this, yes. Okay. The next question is: as the host and executive producer of the Life is a Trip Reincarnation Stories podcast, what has been the most surprising or profound story shared with you, and how has it impacted your own understanding of reincarnation and the metaphysical?
Oh, I love that question. If you've listened to the stories, or if anybody, just so people know that the purpose of the podcast is to share stories. So it is not like an interview podcast. It's writers writing stories, and some of the people have never written, but they have an experience that they put down on paper, and some are professional writers who have never written about reincarnation, and then somewhere in between. And so it's really fun to see the variety of stories. The only rule we have is we really aren't into horror stories. That's not kind of why we're there. But we have so many different kinds of stories. We have one that's not up on the podcast yet, but it's a comedy about ghosts. And you think, how does that fit? But, we want to lighten things up. It's not about heavy duty. It's not about proving anything to anyone. And I think when you say most surprising, is a friend of mine. He's written a lot of science fiction screenplays and a lot of things about time travel, but he'd never written Reincarnation. And I said, you need to write something for the podcast. He's a brilliant writer. His name's Joel Thomas, and you'll get to see his story, Pas de Deux. I think I said it right. I don't know. I don't know my French. But he, or Pas de Deux, I don't know. Anyway, however you say it. And he just said, as soon as he had the idea, it wrote itself. Like, he didn't even have to think about it. It was the easiest story he's ever written. And that was so exciting for somebody who's never written about that at all. He said it just flowed. And I just feel so excited about getting stories like that out in the world.
Wow, I love it. So when someone's interested in being a guest in your podcast, you said it's about story sharing. So the person has to have a story already written, and then you talk about the story, right?
Well, we don't even talk about the story. What we do is we record the story. So we either have an actor reading the story. They can either be a short story, like generally between 1,000 and 3,000 words, or it can be a short film script that's under 20 pages. So some of the film scripts are read by a group of actors, and some are provided to us by the writers and the actors. Sometimes the writer will read their own story. So it is recorded stories. I don't know if you know the Modern Love podcast, but that one's done by the New York Times. And it's just a collection of stories. So people write an essay or a story and they record it. So you just go and listen to stories. So it's not really talking about the story. It's just the story, if that makes sense.
Yes, you mentioned it before that it's not the interview style, and I was not sure about if the person who wrote the story is present or not. But I have to listen to your podcast definitely, and now I'm curious, of course. So thank you so much for sharing, of course. And I have another question. It is. Your We Meet Again trilogy and other works often delve into themes of reincarnation and destiny. What initially drew you to these topics, and how do you see them resonating with readers in today's world?
Oh, I love that question too. You've got great questions. Thank you. I love making me think. Well, one is that over 1.5 billion people on the planet believe in reincarnation. That's a lot of people. And with the exception of perhaps India, there aren't many stories. And it just kind of blows my mind that there aren't more stories. We've got plenty of time travel stories, and people don't have to believe in that. And so I just think that it's important. I love the fact that it can open people's minds. I actually had a fan of my original novels that, as you mentioned, the duet stories, tell me it profoundly changed her life. And I've had people who wouldn't normally believe in reincarnation. Maybe they are very strict Muslim or, fundamentalist Christian or whatever, but they can read the stories and their minds expand. So that's really a big reason for doing it. It doesn't honestly matter to me if people believe in it or not. I just like opening minds. So I think that that's true. And then as far as how I got into it, of course, I've kind of believed in reincarnation for many, many years. My first novels, they're the duet novels. I wrote the first novel just sort of as a normal love story and just tried out my fiction, kind of talents, if you will. And then when I started thinking about writing another book in that series, I was like, well, of course I'm going into their past life because that's going to explain what's happening in the current life. And as somebody, this was a love story. I don't use the term romance usually because there's usually a very strict structure with the romance, and I kind of go off onto tangents with that. But with a love story, they meet, the couple meets, they fall in love. There's something that happens, they fall apart, then they get back together, and blah blah blah. And once they're back together, the story kind of ends, right, with a romance. But with a reincarnation love story, as I said on the story, The End, which is the most autobiographical I've ever gotten, it is the end ever really the end if it's a reincarnation story, right?
Yes.
So it's so much fun to go back and say, okay, who might have these people have been in this other world? And like with the We Meet Again story, it starts with a present day couple, and then it goes back to the 1930s in Brazil, and then it goes to the Renaissance in Austria and Europe and England, and then it goes to the Middle Ages in Italy. So it crosses over, and it's just fun to kind of look at these different time periods and look at the same people, the same souls, but different bodies, different situations, different challenges, all of that.
Oh, I love that so much. Okay, now my imagination started, and I wanted to say something about, yeah, that I now understand better what you meant by the fiction and the truth, because it has something to do when you said there are so many people, 1.5 billion, I think you mentioned, believe in reincarnation, and that is so true. And when I remember people talking about that, then they talk about it is in their mind, and they don't really believe that it's true. And this is maybe why they don't talk about it, they don't write about it. And it's a bit because it's in between, right? It's in a zone in between, and no one knows exactly, unless someone writes it down and talks about it. So thank you so much for the work you do. And if you want to add something before I ask my next question.
Well, I'm just curious where you believe. Like, what have you considered the fact that you might have been born before? Is that something that has ever crossed your mind or made you think?
Yeah, thank you for your question. And it is very inspiring, our interview, because 100% I'm a reincarnation of my grandmother, and
Oh,
I never
wow.
met her, and she died in the year when I was born. And I think I look like her little bit when I look at old photographs. And also I have the same first name. It's Caroline. It's with the I even changed my name 2 years ago. I can talk for hours now, but I think this is the spoiler for the story I'm going to write for you.
Yay! Yay!
No, it's the Caroline story, but the Caroline before, and I changed my because I
That's your title, The Caroline of Before,
the Caroline from before.
or of Before. Yeah. I
Yes.
don't know. I'm just teasing with you. I'm so excited to see you excited.
Yeah, me too, because yeah, I never told that story, but I felt this relationship for so many years when I was a kid already, and I never met her, but she has also a immigration story, let's say, when my family came from East Prussia. It's Poland, and they immigrated to Germany. So, and I love the aspect this to talk about history and how times were at that time. So thank you so much.
I'm
I'm
excited.
excited. So good. Thank you. Okay, my next question is about your goals, and what is the goal with your podcast? I don't know how many episodes you already recorded. Do you have a goal for that? Or what is your next book project? Would you like to share?
Yeah, of course. Well, I'm launching the We Meet Again trilogy next month. I'm not sure when this is going to air, so let's just say September 2024. And I'm launching all three books at once, so that's very exciting. And as far as my books, I do have a couple of other books that I have written that are about halfway finished. So I want to go back and kind of flesh those out when all of this launch is settling down. As far as the podcast, the goal is to change the world. Is that too much?
No, this is the minimum.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, I really think I don't know how many people it's going to reach, right? Nobody knows. It would be such a thrill to me. Like even with your story, maybe Hollywood calls and says, "I want to make that story," right? So it doesn't, I'm not the writer of all the story. Oh, there you are. I love it.
Already there.
Already there. That's fabulous. That's fabulous. Yeah, so we don't know, I don't know how big it's going to be, but even if none of my stories ever get made in Hollywood, which of course, I hope that some of them do, if it would give me immense pleasure and thrill to watch your story get made or Joel's story get made or someone else's. I mean, it's about getting these messages out and having fun with it in the process. I mean, you can see if you see the Life is a Trip podcast and if you see our Life is a Trip group on Facebook, it's light and fun and happy. It's not, oh, you have to believe this. Oh, these are the rules. Oh, this is the parameters. Like, no, let's open up the discussion to possibilities and just enjoy it. So, the more people that enjoy it, the better off it is. And the more people that get heard and more writers like yourself and other writers get noticed, the happier I am.
Wow, that's so great, the message. I love it so much. Thank you. Thank you for our interview. And and please reach out to Brownell. She's amazing. Take a listen to the podcast, join the Facebook group, and just have fun with your story and dare to dream that it's going to be a movie, a Hollywood movie. And wow, it's amazing. Thank you so much. Now is time for your last thought to the audience, please.
Well, I guess one thing is I want really the book, the story I mentioned called The End is free for everyone. So I would love everyone to download that for free and read it. I've actually had a few people tell me they think it could be a college course, which is super exciting, like a 9,000 kind of short story. So I'd love people to read that. And if you like that, you can check out my other writing. My name is Brownell Landrum. I'm the only Brownell Landrum in the world. So, feel free to find me. I'm sure you're going to provide links as well. And I'm just, glad whoever's listening, that you're listening, and hopefully your mind is thinking and that you'll check everything out.
Oh, thank you so much. This was so inspiring. Okay, everyone, pen and paper out or computer and write our reincarnation stories. Thank you. This was our episode with Brownell Landrum. She's amazing. Thank you so much.